All right, good morning, friends. Good to see all of you. Good to see your faces. Good morning, Reedwood Online. Good to see all of you. And Reedwood Online, just so you know, we do see you here in the worship center. So, Mike, Tricia, good to see you. Doug, good to see you. Hi, Brian. Good to see you. Well, it feels good to be in here. We'll take this sunshine, and we're just grateful to be in this place and to gather once again in this space as we continue to seek God together, as we continue to listen to the inward light that we hold throughout the week, and we need to attend to that. Yesterday was an eventful day, wasn't it? We have a new king and a new queen there with the Anglican Church. So I was congratulating clergy that I know there with the Church of England and the Anglican Church, and as well as other friends. My one friend who's he has dual citizenship. And I said, congratulations on your new king. And he said, oh, was that today? I didn't exploit that at all. I just said, yeah, it was. And how about that? And just to think, the tie-in with Quakerism, the Church of England, kind of having a new figurehead there. And, well, that was the same institution that George Fox and Margaret Fell and many early friends said, enough is enough, and they wanted to have that direct communion. And it's in that spirit of direct communion that we come here. Direct communion, that Christ is present in this place, Christ is present in you and in me, and we recognize that. Then also congratulations to the Kentucky Derby winner, 2 fills, I believe. That was an interesting race. I never realized, 45 years old, I never realized that the Kentucky Derby was 1 lap around. I never kind of got that. I thought it was more like an Indianapolis 500 type deal. But then I'm like, well, I guess that does make sense. So I've embarrassed myself enough this morning. Let's go ahead and ground in and center, and I'll open us up with a word of prayer. Let's center, friends. Loving Creator, we have come together here for the sake of communion. For the sake of communion with your Spirit that is hidden and that speaks deeply to our conditions. I pray that we would be open to that deeper communion, and let that spill over into the communion of saints and friends, Lord, as we greet one another, as we interact with one another, as we engage in conversation, and as we engage, Lord, in fellowship. May there also be ministry among us as we seek to serve one another and as we seek to see Christ in all of us, O God. May your light shine forth and speak a true word. We thank you for being in this place. We thank you for just journeying with us. Even in this very moment, we turn to you and say yes and thank you. Lord, it is in love and adoration that we acknowledge these things. We pray these things, O Christ, in your name. Amen and amen. All right, friends, we're going to go ahead and open up with some worship and music. Shirley.
Pussy.
Good morning, friends. Before I begin, I want to recognize two guests that are with us today, one here in our presence and one online. First of all, our guest for the discussion hour after service is Loretta Guzman, who runs the Bison Coffee House. Loretta, thank you for coming. And also online was Luella, who works with the Kateri Tekakwitha, the Catholic Native American organization in California. And I saw her on a minute ago. I think she might be coming back on. Friends, is there a theology of regret? I've thought about that a lot. You see, the general idea, of course, is that sermons are supposed to be uplifting. They're supposed to be positive. I recall an African-American pastor friend of mine, some years ago, he told me that he just had his hands full every Sunday getting his congregation through another week. So, of course, it's important to remind ourselves of God's steadfast love. Isn't that a wonderful word from the Hebrew hesed, steadfast love. But regret? Now, friends, the simple fact is that regret is a deeply biblical exercise. One of the most characteristic aspects of the Old Testament and the Old Testament witness is the fact that the Israelites often remembered their mistakes. It is almost as if one of the primary theologies of the Old Testament is certainly a theology of regret. The historical books, for example, they tell us about King David and his great faith, but those same historical books detail every single one of his horrific mistakes. The prophetic books tell us of God's loving compassion, but they also remind us of our responsibilities for justice towards one another. So there are biblical theologies, both of joy and biblical theologies of regret. Now, friends, you can pretty much guess where I'm going with this. When we speak of indigenous peoples in this country, it will be a conversation among European Americans that must involve regret. It must involve a recognition and regret at the historic mistreatment of indigenous peoples. It must be recognition and regret of treaties and promises that were virtually all broken. Regret and recognition of the damage of the mission schools. Regret at the continued struggles of Native peoples who they do flourish, oftentimes persist and flourish, but it's rarely because of the help we've given them. Usually it's their own strength and God's grace. Now, friends, you see, these regrets don't have to be personal feelings of guilt. They can be the regrets about the failings of a people, the failings of a state, the failings of a country, the failings of Christians around the world. Because when we speak of the plight of indigenous peoples, we aren't only speaking, although for us primarily of Native Americans, but when we speak of indigenous peoples and what they've faced, heaven's sakes, the Ainu of Japan, the Sami of Scandinavia, the Maori in my beloved Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Kanaka Maoli in Hawaii, the list, sadly, is long. Now, what the ancient Hebrews deeply understood, because they talk about it so much, is that we learn from our mistakes, but only if we are willing to name them, only if we are willing to discuss them. Brothers and sisters, I don't care how many states in this country want to ban the discussion of racism in this country. They want to ban the discussion of the mistreatment of Native peoples. They want to ban the discussion of America's mistakes. I don't care. The Bible tells us to name our mistakes and to learn to live a better way. This morning I want to speak about one very, very serious regret. And that is a regret that the people who call themselves Christians, those who call themselves the followers of Jesus, often used the Bible itself to justify some of their worst behavior towards others, and especially towards Native peoples in this country. Friends, you know that I've said many times that the Bible, and especially the Old Testament, speaks with many voices. There is not one writer of the Old Testament. There are many writers. There is not one book. There are many books. There is not one time period, there are many time periods. And among some of those voices in the Hebrew Bible, the very book I have given my life to teach and study, but I am the first one to tell you that many of the voices in that book I do not believe heard God's voice very clearly. When we speak of biblical attitudes toward non-Hebrews, especially the indigenous people of the land that they believed God gave to them, that is the Canaanites. When we speak of the Canaanites in the Old Testament, it is crucial for us to remember that there were different voices in the Bible, because part of that story is very sad indeed. On the one hand, you have the incredible story of the freedom of the Hebrews from their slavery in Egypt. They march out of Egypt. Even some Egyptians, by the way, joined them. So impressed were they with a God of freedom that would lead them out of slavery. And yet, brothers and sisters, those same people, when they entered the land of Canaan, treated the indigenous with horrific brutality, claiming, as did Joshua, this is what God wants us to do. From their freedom in Egypt to the destruction in Canaan. And for many Americans, the story is similar. From the freedom of being free to worship as we wished, so we left European oppression, in many cases serious oppression, and we came to this continent to enjoy our freedom, and what did we do? We turned around and became a nightmare for the people who were here. Sometimes it is important for us to take issue with some of these voices. Sometimes it's important to read a part of the Bible and clearly say, this is not our way as the followers of Jesus. You know, I know how shocking that sounds at first. Disagree with parts of the Bible? How can we do that? The answer, quite simply, is because the Bible already shows us this. Later writers already raise questions about what happened before. The prophets bitterly condemned the mistakes of the earlier kings. Walter Brueggemann, probably our most important biblical theologian, still active in writing, even in his retirement. Walter Brueggemann refers to the two great voices of the Old Testament. The one voice, he calls it the voice of the establishment. That is the pro-king stuff. Rah, rah, us, we're so great. He says that's true, that's in there. Like all the other ancient writings from other ancient kingdoms, so the Bible has that part too. But then Walter goes on to say, but what's unique about the Bible is not the establishment voice, it's the voice of pain underneath. That's what's unique to the Bible. We hear that other voice when we read the scripture. What are those voices? We hear the voice of women who have been dominated in a patriarchal society. We hear the voice of slaves who have been dominated in a society that accepts slavery. And we need to hear the voice of those who faced Joshua the conqueror. You see, friends, Joshua believed that God told him to wipe out every living being in some of the villages of the conquest of Canaan. Wipe them out. The people who lived in the land before the Israelites, we know, were called the Canaanites. they were treated horrifically, killed or enslaved. But friends, thank God that Joshua is not the last word. Nor is Joshua the only word about Canaanites in the Bible. But I'm afraid the damage has been severe. Brother Joshua has a lot to answer for. In North America, European Americans came, settled in this land, and literally described themselves as Joshua, and therefore the people we find are like the Canaanites. European Americans went to Australia. They declared themselves Joshua, and the Aboriginal Australians, they called them Canaanites. European Americans went to my beloved Aotearoa, New Zealand, literally describing themselves as Joshua and the Māori as the Canaanites. Although with the Māori, they had their hands full. We are like Joshua. They are like the Canaanites. Friends, we hear versions of this to this day. America first! Oh, that's not so far from we are like Joshua. But we are here, friends, this morning to talk about the fact, I believe, Joshua did not hear God clearly. And Joshua is not the last word on these matters. Jesus leads us in the true way. You know, the Gospels all have slightly different perspectives on the story of Jesus. The way they give us his teachings, an example, for example. That's probably why we have 4 of them. They didn't want to give up any of the unique messages that were in the other 3. Now, my favorite has always been Luke. And on the topic we're talking about today, Luke is a shining star. Luke pictures Jesus making his first public pronouncement at the beginning of the gospel. As one of my Mennonite teachers referred to it as, Luke is presenting Jesus as giving his party platform. And so he reads from Isaiah 61 in his synagogue. And he reads that passage that says, good news to the poor, release to the captives, sight to the blind, and freedom for the oppressed. And of course, at first, they all celebrate him. Is this not Joseph's son? In other words, isn't this our homeboy? We're so proud of him. Until Jesus says, and this same good news, this same release, this same sight and freedom is for non-Hebrews as well as Hebrews. Oh, then they turned on him. See, Jesus wasn't very good at America first. He was kind of into love and compassion for everyone. That's hard for some folks to take. Now, my second favorite is Matthew. Matthew collects many of the sayings and teachings of Jesus, and he collects them and puts them into a long sermon. And he places Jesus on a hill to give this long sermon, right? That's why we call it the Sermon on the Mount. But of course, Matthew, remember, is directing, it seems, most of his thinking about Jesus, he's directing that to his Jewish readers. And so the idea of a person of God standing on the mount and understanding and teaching the ways of God, oh, that has profound resonance for Jews, of course. Because Matthew presents Jesus as the new Moses. Like Moses was on Sinai, so Jesus is on the mount and presenting us with what some have called the new law of Christ. But in that famous sermon, 5 times, Jesus starts a sentence, "You have heard it said, but I say." Folks, some of those times when Jesus said, "You've heard it said before," some of those times he says that, he quotes directly from the Old Testament. "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." That's straight out of the laws of Moses. And then Jesus says, "But I say." And Jesus clarifies for us. Jesus tells us what we should have heard all this time, but somehow got a little confused. The 5th and final of those "you have heard it said" is one that is treasured by Quakers. "You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." Pretty basic human thinking. We're all used to that. "You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you." Brothers and sisters, this is one of the classic biblical passages for Quaker nonviolence. So let us be clear. There were times when Jesus challenged the older tradition. And most of the time, when Jesus challenged the older tradition, he challenged the older tradition's violence, he challenged the older tradition's vengefulness, he challenged the old tradition's arrogance. I am happy to say that there are many times when we Quakers have tried hard to take this seriously. Where there was hatred, we've tried to live by compassion. Where there was bigotry, we've tried to live without prejudice. Where there was violence, we have tried to live peacefully. Now, we don't always get it right, but I'm pretty happy we've at least tried. And where people have been mistreated, we've often tried to be compassionate. But Jesus continues to challenge us. And the Gospel of Matthew especially works hard to try to show us how deeply Jesus challenged the tradition and challenges us. How different was his way from what we were used to. So what does all this have to do with Native peoples? Well, let's get to the heart of the matter right away. We've said that one of the legacies of the Old Testament was that Canaanite meant bad. Canaanites were to be enslaved, wiped out, driven away. Now, we already have seen that the Gospels present Jesus as challenging the negative attitude toward non-Jews. That's established. But Matthew particularly has an interesting way of presenting this. Matthew seems to always present the example or teaching of Jesus in 2 steps. Step 1, he talks about the old way. Step 2, he talks about his way. So there's always those 2 steps. We have to look for them. Every time Jesus does anything in the Gospel of Matthew, look for the 2 steps. The old way and his way. In Matthew 8, it starts off by saying that a number of people came to Jesus asking him for healing, and Jesus healed them. They were Hebrews, fellow Hebrews. Jesus was taking care of his own. Yes, fine, that's the established way. The old way, the traditional way. We look after our own. Then it says, immediately after these Hebrews are asking for healing, immediately after that, a Roman centurion approaches Jesus. a Roman occupier. Now, the centurion has authority. He can make trouble. Jesus agrees to come to his home to heal a servant. Now, perhaps Jesus assumed he was being ordered by this Roman centurion, but then the unexpected happens. Again, the two steps. The expected way, and then the unusual thing happens. The centurion stops Jesus. No, I am not worthy for you to come to my home. A Roman centurion saying to this Galilean preacher that he, the Roman centurion, is not worthy. And the only reason he gives is because I'm a man of authority. I order people around. In other words, friends, that Roman is admitting, I am an occupying soldier in your land. And I am not ordering you. If you choose. The Roman effectively says, choose us too. The old way. The old way was that the conquering soldiers lorded over the conquered people. The Jesus way, the occupier recognizes the evil of his occupation and knows that he is unworthy. Now, this brings us to one of the most interesting and, quite frankly, often disturbing passages in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, Matthew, as we know, used heavily the older Gospel of Mark. But when Matthew uses some of Mark's material, Matthew puts an interesting twist on it, many times. So let's read the original story that we're talking about as it appeared in the older Gospel of Mark. Let's hear what Mark says first. Now, a woman who was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin begged Jesus to cast a demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found the child lying on the bed. The demon had gone. Now, friends, there's no way around this. This is kind of a disturbing story. Some people try to make themselves feel a little better by saying, well, maybe Jesus learned from her that day. Maybe he needed a little reminding of his universal message. Friends, I don't buy that argument. And the reason I don't is because the Gospels have already clearly shown us that Jesus has already preached his universal message of love. So I don't think that's it. Some have tried to argue that the Greek word for dogs in this passage is little dogs, puppies, so it actually was friendlier than it sounded. I'm not sure I buy that one either. How is this? Bert, let's have the first illustration. There's traditional ways in which this was portrayed. Here's a medieval manuscript of this story. You see, at first, Jesus has his back to her. Then he turns to proclaim healing. People have tried to deal with this. Maybe some have said this picture seems to suggest that Jesus was moved by pity and her persistence. Well, that's possible. But how does the Gospel of Matthew understand this story? Get ready for a revolution, because Matthew makes some fascinating moves. Let's have the second illustration. Now, here is the Syrophoenician woman with the Catholic traditional recognition of a saint, the halo. Now, this image suggests that there's something very special about this woman, and that the story has something very special to say. First of all, Matthew's version of the story is a bit longer than Mark's. Let's hear Matthew's version. It's in Matthew 15. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away. She keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And the daughter was healed instantly. Now, friends, there's two things I want to point out right away about Matthew's version of this story. First of all, Mark did not give her a voice. She's described until after Jesus speaks. In Matthew, she calls to Jesus. She even calls Jesus Son of David. She invokes, this Canaanite woman invokes Hebrew history by invoking the great king of the Jews, David. This Canaanite woman knows her Hebrew history. Matthew, therefore, presents us with a woman who is well aware of the dangerous issues she is digging up by mentioning David. She is referring to that history when Canaanites were hated. And more profoundly, Mark refers to her technically as a Syrophoenician woman. Matthew cuts straight to the point. She is Canaanite. Notice how the others say, "Send her away." That's the old way. And in fact, Jesus even invokes a bit of the old way at first. The stage is set, friends. The old way is invoked. Everyone fully expects Jesus now to walk away. The old tradition verified. He faces this woman and turns the entire Israelite tradition on its head. Woman, not dog. Woman, great is your faith. Our third image now, Bart. Woman, great is your faith. Now, I believe Matthew is being true to form here. He presents the old way. He even plays the game, only to turn it over. Great is your faith, he says. It's the Greek word from which we get our term mega. It's used in Exodus 6, where God says, "I will redeem you with mighty acts of judgment." Mega. Exodus 7, out of Egypt by mega acts of judgment from God. Even in Acts 4:13, it refers to great power when the apostles give their testimony. This is the word. Jesus doesn't say to her, "Yeah, you're okay for a Canaanite." Jesus doesn't say, C plus, satisfactory. Jesus does not say, "Not bad for a dog." No. In one word, Matthew overthrows the tradition. Matthew calls her a Canaanite. Joshua is overthrown. The old bigotry and genocide is overthrown. Jesus reigns. Compassion is the law. We don't live the way of Joshua. When we confront our history, compassion is the new law of Jesus. We remember the treatment, friends, of African Americans, of Asian Americans, and yes, Native Americans, and we remember that compassion is the law of Jesus. In the Catholic tradition where I work today, of course, this young woman has become symbolic of the church's both regret and celebration. This is the first Native American saint, Kateri Tekakwitha, Mohawk young woman. And the celebrations in Rome were heard around the world in 2012 when there was celebrations of the sainthood of Kateri. So, friends, we take steps to try to live the new reign of Christ. So, when we discover that a Native American businesswoman is making a go of it right here in Portland, then maybe it's a chance for us Quakers to say, we want to support this. Because we know, brothers and sisters, that those first awful words about the Canaanites that were spoken in the Old Testament are not the last words about a Canaanite in the Bible. The way of Joshua has been far too common in American history. It's time for the way of Jesus. Now, it is good for us Quakers to remind ourselves of the witness of our Lord, to remind ourselves of the witness of our own Quaker heritage, to call on us to remember. We will never forget the mistakes of going the way of Joshua, because we are learning the way of the compassion of Jesus. You know, there's a little irony here. The irony is that Yahshua and Yeshua are virtually the same name. Joshua and Jesus. In Hebrew, it's virtually the same name. And yet, what a world of difference between that first Joshua and that second Yeshua, Jesus. What is the last word spoken to an indigenous woman in the Bible? The last word, woman, great is your faith. Now, friends, after our open worship, we have a guest with us who will join us for conversation, and that is that Native American businesswoman that I just referred to is here with us today. And we will have a conversation with her during the forum hour, and then after that, we've put together a coffee tasting. She has brought 4 different coffee roasts that she sells in her cafe, and we're all going to have a little scientific experiment here, which is how discerning a palate do Christians actually have for coffee? So we've got little sample cups. We'll be all ready to go after that conversation. But friends, let's take a few moments here and go into open worship and quiet waiting on the Lord.
Friends, are our hearts clear this time of open worship? Friends online, are our hearts clear? Okay. Friends online, just so you know, we do see you here in the meeting room. What was running through my mind was it's good to acknowledge when truth is spoken, and I feel like the Spirit of truth has descended here and has been spoken, and it's my hope that we carry that and let it pour then into our actions and into that ongoing question that we have every Sunday: what next? What next? It's one thing to have kind of the exposure to the truth. What next? How do we put that into action? Thank you, Daniel, for your words, for that message. We're going to go ahead and just move into a time of any sort of shared concerns or shared celebrations or joys within the meeting that needs to be acknowledged and shared. Suzanne has a microphone. If there are any joys or concerns that we want to acknowledge here in the meeting at this time. Just wanted to create an opportunity there. Hi, Darla.
Can't seem to get through one Sunday without asking you for help. I have a friend, Bruce, who's on his way to California today. His father, who was 103, passed away about a month ago, so he's going south to take care of the estate. He has 4 siblings. Everybody knows what's going on. But he also has a sister-in-law who's extremely greedy, doesn't want him in the house until she can get in there. I'd love to have you pray for Bruce, his safety in driving to and from, and his whatever you want to call it, with his sister-in-law. And let's pray for her too. She seems to have an attitude that needs to be corrected. But I really want Bruce to be safe and to be calm and to be able to handle the situation. Thank you.
Anything else? Anything online? Anyone online? Okay. Let's find our center again. Oh, yeah, Brian. Hi, Brian.
COVID seems to be very, very active again. In my little family, 4 of us now have COVID. 2 brothers, my son, and myself, all with mild cases. But just let me warn everybody that it is around.
We will be remembering you, Brian. Thank you. Yes, Doug.
And on that note, May 11th is the last free COVID booster shots you can get. After that, you will pay for that or your insurance will.
Thank you, Doug.
have our community pray for Janice. She starts radiation treatments for 7 weeks, Monday through Friday, every day for 7 weeks. She starts radiation treatment for her cancer. And I think it would be encouraging to her to know that we're praying for her.
Thank you, Dwight. Okay. Let's find our center, friends, and I'll share just a few words in prayer. Creator God, we are mindful of the beauty that permeates this world, the beauty of the outdoors and the creation, the beauty that we find in our most beloved relationships, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, the beauty that we find in companionship with our spouses and our friends. Lord, all of these things are signposts, and they are reflective witnesses to the goodness that is at the center and at the heart of your divine Spirit. Lord, may we be impacted and find a fresh experience of your divine love and your compassion. Lord, we learn compassion ourselves by experiencing it for ourselves. We learn the ways of love by experiencing the ways of love by ourselves and within ourselves. We understand and know the message of mercy, the message of long-suffering, the message in the ways of patience in this world by experiencing it firsthand. And that is why we turn to you, O Creator. Lord, there are lessons, deep, deep lessons we have learned, and yet we need to revisit and learn again. Help us, O God. We receive these with joy and in the spirit of faith with open hands. Lord, the names that have been named, we're thinking of Bruce. We're thinking of Bruce's sister-in-law. We're thinking of Brian and his family. We're thinking of dear Janice. We hold each one of these people in the light and ask that you would care for them and that grace and mercy would visit them now, even in this hour. We thank you, Spirit, for speaking and to continue to speak to our hearts and conditions well after this meeting. In the name of Christ, amen. Well, again, I know it's been mentioned already, but we do want to encourage friends to stay on here starting at 11 a.m. For Forum. And we're going to have just a really good conversation, and if anything, to be able to meet our friend Loretta. Thank you so much for coming. Also, what to expect next week for Forum. We're going to be hearing from Eric Muir, And it's a longtime friend, and it's been a while since Eric has come and been shared among us, but he's going to be sharing the forum next week, and we'll be celebrating that day. And also, just a heads up, next week is Mother's Day. So just, you've been, you have a heads up there, all of y'all. And we'll be celebrating that and acknowledging our mothers and our mother figures and those who have mothered us next week. So we look forward to that celebration. I also want to just kind of turn your attention to a new feature that has been put together and collaborated and is almost done there. Here at Reedwood. It's straight down this hall, and it's called the Hall of Light, or Hallway of Light. And this is something that elders and others have collaborated with, and this is a contemplative space, and it's to be used for contemplation, for reflection, and it's almost done, but you are more than welcome to go and share in those images and those quotes, and just to kind of see what that's all about. We will have an official time of dedication and opening here probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks. But if you happen to walk down that hall, you're going to see some photography and quotes. That is the Hallway of Light, and it is for the sake of and benefit of lifting spirits and speaking and helping us see in the truth of beauty that is active in this world. All right, friends. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a small break, and we will come back in here at 11, and there will be a conversation that we're going to be having. Yeah, Beth. What would? Tuesday. Oh, tomorrow I have. Yeah, tomorrow I have jury duty. So we'll see if that jury duty spills over into Tuesday. If it does, we will go ahead and lay down Tuesday Bible study if that happens. But hopefully we'll get an email out for that. So go in peace, friends. We'll see you in here at 11.